Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It is FC Kairat 0, Celtic 0, but FC Kairat go through after what can all be described as a very poor penalty shootout from our perspective. Congratulations to Kairat. We'll give them due credit when we can, but I think, let's just turn to our performance tonight. Kevin, the result that we all feared, the result absolutely none of us wanted. The banana skin that we described turned out to be slippier than what we thought. Really, really poor night. And two things I want to touch on before I bring you in, Kevin. I want to first of all say that the fans who travelled over to the end of Europe really to watch that deserve to see a hell of a lot better than what was on track. But they deserve a lot of credit for making effort out there. And indeed, I would say every supporter that follows this club, us included, deserve better than what we've seen tonight. There's blame to be apportioned. We've blamed the board, we've blamed recruitment, we've blamed the quality of certain players. Tonight, I think there's a collective failure, and it does include the manager and his coaching staff. But Kevin, as difficult as it is to be objective, we'll do our best, and we will stick around for the half hour to talk about it. Thanks to everybody that's sticking with us. We're already up to over 800. I'm sure those numbers will continue to climb, and do appreciate everyone's support. But Kevin, let's come at you, mate. What did you make of that game? Where did we lose that game tonight?
We lost it last week at Celtic Park, I think.
Yeah.
I think before the tie, so before we kicked off last week, the realisation would have been that this was the tougher of the two games because of all the kind of the other factors going into it. Honestly, these are not excuses, but the travel, the time difference could make a difference. The playing at altitude, they're all factors that could influence this game. We knew that going into the first game, which is why they're not excuses for not going through in the tie. We knew about them. We were dreadful in the first game. We created nothing, and we got what we deserved from that, which was nothing, basically. And that's where we've lost it, because at Celtic Park, with the greatest of respect to Kairat, we should be winning that game. And it can be a difficult game, but if we come through that 1-0, 2-0, if Dyson scores the chance at the very end of the first game, then we come here with a 1-0 lead, and we can play this turgid, dreadful performance that we put out again tonight, and we still somehow managed to go through. So I think we lost it by not winning the first game. Today we just didn't get going, and I don't know what the reason is. If it was, like I say, a game plan to try and combat the conditions by playing a slow game and manage the players through it for longer, if that was the plan, to try and win it within the 90, but reserve energy for the extra time if it was coming, if there was something in there. But we didn't create enough. We had one shot at goal in the first half, one header. It was James Forrest. Second half, up until the end, we didn't really create anything either. It was a couple of long shots. Engels tried to force the issue a little bit when he came on, and then Maida misses his chance right at the end. But given the players that we've got and from what we've seen domestically, I think we should expect to see a lot better performance. We should expect to see a lot more intensity in the performance, a bit more direct, actually look as if we wanted to win the game. And we didn't tonight, and we paid the price for that.
Yeah, one of the things we mentioned on the pre-match, Kevin, and it's been mentioned a few times over the course of the week, and certainly since the first leg, is what we needed tonight was strong mentality. We needed a bit of resilience. We needed the players to step up and show their mettle, as it was. And you're looking at players, you're looking at the experienced 10-year players, the Kieran Tierney's, the Tony Ralstons, the Callum McGregors, the Carter Vickers, the Schmeichels, the seasoned players. And you're looking for them to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and really show that urgency and that impetus. But we almost started the game and looked like a team who knew that they were on to a really tough result tonight. There's a few things to look at. I want to be clear here. We'll try not to focus too much on the emotional side. I know everybody's feeling pretty tough, and it's always tough to come on and do the analysis immediately after a game and a result in a performance like that. But we'll try and break down certain events throughout the match. But a couple of things I want to talk about. I mean, you mentioned Dyson's. You mentioned Dyson's miss in the first leg. Well, we saw it again tonight, right? We saw this lack of composure from someone that we all consider to be, probably our best striker at the club at the moment. We know Dyson is not the complete player. If he was, as we've said many times, he would not be at the club. And I'm using Dyson and not Maeda, because I remember you coined the difference between the two entities sometimes when he's good.
Right. When he's Dyson's the evil twin.
Dyson seems to be the evil twin. I think Dyson is always going to be a player that's going to need 3 or 4 clear-cut chances to get a couple of goals. I don't think he's a one chance, one goal type of man. And I think sometimes you compare him and Kyogo. Kyogo's a big miss because he was a player for the big moments. The pressure moments, the moments where you needed a goal, Kyogo would more often than not come up trumps. And I think that's an element that Maeda lost. He's got brilliant attributes that he brings to the table. But those are moments that win you or cost you games tonight. And I think, unfortunately, and listen, this is not picking on any one particular player. It's a moment in the game that we're talking about. But it's a moment that was the sliding doors moment. It's a moment that could have put us through. The other decision I want to talk about is it's on the manager, but you look at our bench, right? And we had 4 strikers on our bench. We had Adam Idah, we had Johnny Kenny, we had Shin Yamada, and we had Callum Osmond. Now, Callum Osmond may be the least likely to come on. Adam Idah travels out for this match, carrying an injury. And we know he had an injury. We know he wasn't fit. He didn't start the game. But he's brought on to try and change the game. Now, Adam Idah came on and did some good stuff in that match, right? Didn't manage to win it, didn't do anything outstanding, but didn't do anything horrendously wrong. But you've got 2 guys on the bench, Shin Yamada and Johnny Kenny, who are full of energy, one of which has just scored his first goal of the season. Why does Adam Idah go on ahead of them in a game where energy was what we seem to be lacking?
Is it as simple as he's the £9 million signing, and he's got to prove the price tag, and Brendan's got to prove that his signing is worthy of playing? I don't know. I don't know if that's the reason. I don't know if there is anything in something like that. And that your alternative is a player that I'd said I would bring on at halftime, which was Johnny Kenny.
Yep.
Johnny Kenny is a player that until maybe the beginning of this season, because we've got a dearth of strikers, a lot of Celtic fans would have been happy to see move on, because we don't see him either as being a regular goal scorer number 9 for us. So I don't know. I don't know why he's going with Idah. He didn't have the qualities that we were needing for this game. I agree with that. I think we needed someone with the movement, which is why I'd suggested Kenny. But is there a price tag thing that puts Idah ahead of Kenny? There shouldn't be. I think Kenny's the striker on form because he's just scored at the weekend and he's buzzing about that.
Got confidence.
It means a lot in these type of games. It's exactly why I also kind of suggested McCowan, because he's scored this season and because he's the type of player that does take pot shots, and he almost scored as soon as he came on.
Yeah.
So to me, it's strange that he's brought on Idah, and watching the way that he plays as well, it's so frustrating. I hate to see my centre forward dropping as deep as he is. He's collecting a pass, and I know he's been asked to do this, and there must be a reason behind it at times if it works. But he's been asked to drop deep and collect a pass on the edge of the centre circle, and what he does is he wall passes it back to the player that's just given it to him.
Yeah,
and no one's really moving in behind him. Maybe it works if there's movement in behind him, the space he's vacated, but we weren't getting that, and it's so frustrating. And that's not Idah's game. Idah is a penalty box striker,
yes,
but we're not playing him there. The most frustrating thing with that is that the boy who was great at dropping deep and linking the play and then turning and making something of the next ball was Kyogo. And we've sold him in January and we've never looked to replace him. As you said, if it's Kyogo that gets that chance instead of Dyson, I'm sure it's a goal. And I'll go back and say the last Glasgow derby of last season, Dyson misses a big chance at the end. He misses a big chance in the cup final at the end. He's missed a big chance against Kairat last week and again this week. So this, for me, is why he's not a natural centre forward. He's not a natural number 9. That's not really his fault, though, is it? It's not his game. But we've been asking him to do that because we've had a whole summer to sign a centre forward and we haven't done it.
Yeah.
Again, your very first question, how did we lose this game? Well, we didn't really lose it just because of tonight. We lost it because of last week, and we lost it because we've done absolutely nothing to address the glaring holes in the squad. And if we spend £5 million on our second choice target for a number 9, he scores a goal tonight, and we go through, and then we get 40 million, and we can spend 7 to 10 million on the boy we actually want. Do you know what I mean? You speculate, you accumulate, you progress, and we do not do that as a football club.
Absolutely. This felt like a £40 million gamble tonight. The failure to prepare, and as the tagline goes, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Chris Sutton mentioned that. I think first a lot of people have cottoned onto it, which I think rightly. I think it does describe the strategy. Look, there will definitely be time over the next few days, as I'm sure Paul John and the rest of the team will break down the failure of recruitment and failure in various other areas. I do want to focus on the footballing department for a little bit tonight. Now, I've been a big supporter of Brendan Rodgers. Anyone that watches this show will recognise that. I've always been happy to have him back. I've always respected what he's brought to the club and the success that he's had. The one element that I've always criticised, and I've criticised it lightly, but I think I'm going to bring it to the forefront tonight, is in matches such as tonight, and this includes the first leg, where we can see the system that we play, the very inflexible and rigid system that we play, is not working. Why is there this inability to change it? We know he doesn't have the personnel he wants, right? He sent out enough signals to show that. We know he doesn't have the players that he wants to have there. He wants more quality. It's obvious to anyone that watches that we don't have what we need on the wings. That's fine. So why not change it? Surely a manager's job is to adapt to the opposition or the situation that's taking place in the match. Do we have to point the lens onto Brendan Rodgers tonight? And we take into account all the other factors, right? We take into account the failure to recruit, maybe the manager not feeling backed, maybe there's stuff going on behind the scenes, right? But if we just focus purely on the 11 against 11 on the park tonight, it was clear from very early on in that game we were not going to get things our own way. Yet we continually persist by fitting players into the same rigid system and hoping for some sort of different outcome. And yet again, we've seen that this has led to a poor result. Is it time now where the manager has to be examined?
Yeah, I think so. I think managers should be examined after every game. Win, lose or draw, you've got to, if you do proper analysis of it, you look at it and you go, what were the strengths, the weaknesses, the good points, the bad points of the performance? And tonight it's going to be pretty easy to pick out a lot of bad points because the game was littered of them. But one of them is definitely, and it's been a consistent theme during Rodgers' first spell and his second spell, is that tactically he doesn't change. He is very rigid. He's married to this 4-3-3 system. Occasionally, you might say he changes it up and he'll play with a double pivot, so you could call it a 4-2-3-1. It's essentially the same thing, though. But he doesn't change it. He doesn't change it in a positive way, and that's poor game management. So if Brendan wants to be an elite level manager, he needs to improve that. You see it in leagues all across Europe. It's like I'll go and watch a game in the Hungarian First Division over the weekend, and I will see teams that will change formation as the games go on because they're adapting to either being on the front foot and they're trying to capitalise on a weakness in the opposition. They're trying to make something happen, or they're trying to defend and hold a position, and they'll be a bit more defensive. We just seem to stick with the same 4-3-3, horseshoe of death, pass.
Yeah.
And it's usually back and sideways. There's very little that goes forward. There's very little kind of penetrative passes. And the front three don't make the runs either, which would help with that. So, he is very tactically inflexible, whatever the right word is there. And it costs us in these big games because I think tonight's a perfect game for going back to a good old 4-4-2 times, actually. Yeah. Having watched it through, never mentioned it at half time, but watching it through, you'll go, actually, for 4-4-2, if we can use the wings and get boys going down the wing, put crosses into that box, you've got two strikers. Yeah. One of them could be Ida, and you just have him in there trying to win the ball, and whoever the second striker is picking up on the loose ball. That would help, but we'll never make that change. Brendan's so married to 4-3-3, and it becomes very easy to read us and break us down. And I think someone's put it in the group chat, and I'm sure loads of people have been commenting here as well. Is that Kairat clearly did their homework on us. and they know that one style that we've got. So they just need to set up in one system as well to stop us. They don't need to think about what the plan B is and how they're going to react. They just set up a banks of four, block us, cut down the passing lane, stifle the play, and unless we get lucky, they'll get the result that they wanted.
Yeah, and look, at the risk of sounding like armchair managers, which is always a risk when you start talking tactics, and many people will say, well, "What have you ever done in football?" But I think when you look at the sheer amount of whether it be comments online, whether it be the comments on here, whether it be our group chat, various things, there are so many voices saying it's not working, make the change, and yet it almost seems like a stubbornness not to do it. And listen, who am I to argue with a man that's won the amount of trophies that Brendan Rodgers has? But you can only base it on what you see, and as most managers acknowledge, you're only as good as your next game, right? Your next result. And unfortunately, this has been a big one. Tonight, I think, was our biggest game of the season so far. I think we're very fortunate that we have very little competition domestically, because I think we are not in great shape in terms of our team at the moment. We need reinforcements. Now, though, this could harm our ability to reinforce to the level we need. That this could be really detrimental to our ability to get into the Champions League next year. Because if we're going to face more qualifiers, are we going to see the right level of investment to ensure we get there? We know our board is reactive, but that it's a season away. If we go and dominate domestically, because it's not looking like we're going to get much competition, does the board just say, no, we'll wait and see if you get into the Champions League before we back you again? And as we saw tonight, that is a huge gamble. So it is very, very frustrating. I do want to bring in some comments. As you can imagine, I'm going to have to be careful with the comments, because there's a lot of, obviously, emotion and coming through the comments, so I will try and vet these a little bit as I bring them in. But I'll bring in Officer Feelgood 1888, great avatar. 3 penalties missed, got what we fully deserved. Yeah, I mean that I've seen that sentiment a lot, Kev. People saying this was what we deserved. We got the rewards that our play merited, and that was absolutely nothing. I'll try and pronounce his best thing as Maish Raja. Kairat played a mid-block like last week. Celtic had to go more direct and long for field, pause and counter press. Result on Rodgers' poor tactics. Yeah, the manager is getting quite a bit of criticism. Joseph Kelly comes in to say, we're lucky Rangers are so poor. In any other era, the board's incompetence would show. Now, look, I'm not going to sit here and have a go at our rivals at the moment, as it would feel too petty to do that. But the concern is, Kevin, are the board only measuring themselves against being able to beat Rangers? Is that the measuring stick? It's often been suspected that that's the case, but when you see the lack of backing for the manager, the lack of new recruits coming in, the lack of replacing quality players who've gone. We've mentioned Kyogo, we've had Kuhn move out, we've had other players who have left. We've been unfortunate with injuries to Jota. But is the board firmly looking at the domestic dominance, and they just view Europe as a bonus? Because that, based on what we're seeing in the comments and based on what we're seeing online, is not where we as supporters want to be. We want to be progressing in Europe.
Mm-hmm. It definitely seems like that's the approach that the board have got. It is just about being, an inch or two ahead of Rangers. If we keep them at bay, we win the league, everyone should be happy. I believe they have the view that if we were to go out and absolutely, spend Bury Rangers as a domestic force, or put ourselves in such a dominant position that they're not a force anymore to be reckoned with, it would be bad for business. So they have to keep them just at arm's length, but us always just in front. I had another point I was going to make around that as well. Sorry. So your whole point as well. Sorry, the question is around sort of Europe as well and the aspirations there.
Yeah.
So is it 2 seasons ago in the AGM, the comment comes out, and we participated in European competition this season or in the Champions League. They're just happy to be there. And that showed by tonight, because as you say, it was a £40 million gamble. If they were serious about us being a Champions League team, we would have spent £10 million over the summer on 2 players, 2 £5 million players, a winger and a centre forward, let's say. And they didn't have to be our number 1 targets, but just good players.
Yeah.
that would be enough, I'm sure, to see us over the line against Kairat. We go through, we get the 40 million, we can then spend another 20, you know. The 10 that we would spend to get us there, well, it's recouped. It's also coming out of the money that we've got in for Kyogo last season, for Nicholas Kuhn, for Lagerbielke, for the money we've got in from Frimpong. We've not even touched the 70 or 80 million that was already sitting in the bank. They don't have the ambition, a serious ambition to become a serious football club, and they definitely don't match the ambition of the average Celtic fan like you or I, who actually wants to see us do more than just participate in European competition. We want to go and compete. And last season we did. And that's the real kicker about this as well, is that we did compete last season. People can say, and we can say, you and I do say often, Ida's not been the player that we thought he would be. And Engels hasn't quite hit the highs either. But Ida scored a couple of goals in the Champions League for us last season. Engels also scored a few and was chipped in with some assists. They helped us to progress in Europe to a point where we took Bayern Munich to 2 seconds away from an extra time there. You know, we were really close against that, and I think that gave everyone a lot of hope and belief that we were moving in the right direction for the first time in a long time in Europe. And it's a kick in the stones that we've done what we've done again this summer, and this is totally just regressing to what we did for years. It's just not investing, putting all the risk in jeopardy in one game. Now it's gone. We're totally deflated. We're going into our biggest domestic game of the season at the weekend. You could probably see that far enough just now, because none of us are. You didn't really want to talk about football. That's what we're doing. You know, they've killed our mood at the moment, and it's so avoidable.
Yeah, I think what really got me about tonight is the amount of trepidation about this match. There was a real fear that this result was going to go this way. You know, we all wanted to be optimistic. We were cautiously optimistic. We joked about being behind the couch, but there was a real anxiety about this match and this result. And when you consider what we achieved last season, you consider the progress we made in Europe. You think about how financially well off the club is, because the club like to promote that element. None of us, I think there's always an element where we all kind of expect it, but you still go into that element of disbelief. Like, there's no way we'll end up in the same situation again. We won't see rinse and repeat again. It won't be a hard reset again. And yet here we are. And we've done too many of these shows where we're on the end of these sort of matches or performances or results. Surely there has to be the straw that breaks the camel's back at some point, because we're seeing within the support some real, discontent, and I think it's justified. And a lot, the argument is labelled against us, you're entitled. Look at the amount of success. Other supporters of other teams will say, well, we would love to have the success you have. Well, look, you can still criticise if you've still got an upward trajectory to try and meet. Right? If you're wanting to progress as a football club, you have to continue progressing. The only way we can continue progressing is to invest for Europe, for European competition. If we're not doing that, then surely we have the right as supporters. And by the way, the amount of money and time and effort that supporters put in, all different circumstances, that all supporters put into this club, and yet they don't see the same reinvestment back. Right? A lot of times people will say that it's a well-run football club. I'm going to put a counter argument into that, and it'd be interesting to see what people in the comments say. I think it's a very poorly run football club. Now, I'll clarify what I mean by that. The club are very, very good at generating revenue. They take assets, they develop them, they sell them on at a profit, right? That part of the model works very, very well. The part where it fails is the money that comes from those assets is not reinvested into the football operation. Right? Now, whether they term it going into a rainy day, whether it's going into a trust fund, whether it's going into some sort of weird pot somewhere, it is not being reinvested in the football operation. We've got a stadium that is in disrepair. We've got customer experience, which is not what it should be. We've got a media operation, which is substandard compared to many of its competitors. And we have a poor product now on the park, and a manager who's openly showing his frustration. There has to be some accountability on that, Kevin, surely.
You would like to hope so, but I still think there'll be a lot of maybe not after tonight and because of tonight, but within that dressing room, within that boardroom as a whole, I still think there's going to be a lot of backpacking going on. Because I think Desmond has come out with kind of similar kind of statement as well. Or his question is, if you question me, how many trophies have we won in my time, my stewardship of the club? And you can't argue against that. We have won loads. We have been so dominant domestically, it's unreal. But there comes a point where that's just not enough. And I'll look at the Club Bruges as the example, and there's other teams like them who play in a league that's probably of a similar size and standard to us, and certainly revenue-wise, I would think it's about the same. But what they do is they sell a player and then they spend that money on two or three other players, the next guy that's coming through. And they've grown and grown over, and it maybe take them the best part of a decade, but they'll grow and grow and they will become regular Champions League competitors. They're not there just to participate, they're there to compete. And they've done it because they've had a plan for progression, which we do not have. I mean, I agree with you 100% that we're not a well-run football club.
No.
We're a fantastically well-run business. There's many a business would love to have 70 or 80 million pounds just sitting in cash in the bank, doing nothing, gaining interest. But there's no football club should be sitting with 70 or 80 million pounds in the bank. That should be going into infrastructure, investment in infrastructure. You've said it, the stadium needs it, the training facilities need it. We need to have better, just regular facilities for fans and match days. Acsom shouldn't have to go and do the fan zone. Celtic should be doing that.
I agree.
And that's off the pitch. On the pitch, we should be investing in players as well. And the irony, in my opinion, of it is, if we do invest more in good players, we will get further in competitions. We will gain more revenue. You will have more money in the bank.
This was the point that I was going to pick up there, because I think you make a great point. We talk about it's a very well run business. I don't know many businesses that would take such a gamble on a potential and the very achievable potential to generate £40 million in revenue. So that for me makes me question even the business sense of those in charge, because there are not many revenue generating businesses that operate like that. The apologies is a little bit away from the football side, but it's relevant because that was a huge gamble. And from a business sense, somebody would lose their job over that. It's diabolical. But what we never see is accountability, right? And we try and apportion blame fairly. We try and say, look, we give the board credit for what they do well, which, as you say, their trading model to a point is very well run. But it's now being run to the detriment, I think, of the football operation, which means that a manager is working in a restricted fashion, or he's under parameters which are make his job more challenging than it should be. We are not treating our supporters, our very hardworking and committed supporters, like customers, as they should be. They should be treated like customers, and they should be given a product and given the opportunity to feedback on a product, and they should be given the opportunity to have a voice and a say in the running of something that they commit to and make a huge commitment to. So the frustration has to be levelled at all different areas of the football operation at the moment. We've criticised the manager tonight for his tactical inflexibility, but it does go beyond that, as you've said.
Yeah, I disagree slightly on one thing. I don't think that we should be treated as customers of the club. I think we should be treated as part owners of the club.
Well,
because if we don't put our money in,
that would agree with.
We don't put our money in, then Scrooge McDuck doesn't have his 70 million to sit on in the bank. And I know this is one of those controversial topics that comes up when people talk about how can you influence change within a football club like this, and the one that comes up is a boycott. And I don't know really where I stand on it, because if I was back home in Scotland, I'd love to go to the games every week, and there's very little that would kind of stop me from doing it, because that hurts the team, that hurts the players in the park. But otherwise, if we don't buy the merchandise, if we don't buy the DVDs and whatever it is, if we don't just give them money hand over fist all the time, that's the only way I think that these people will sit up and take notice that something isn't right. Otherwise, they'll sit in their ivory towers and they'll look and they will count the money. They will look at the trophies in the cabinet and go, all is well. What are you complaining about?
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. Let's get a few more comments in. We are about just hit the half-hour mark. I'll just get a few more of your comments and then we'll let everybody get back to the night tonight. I'm already in trouble for the dinner being late, so thanks for that, Celtic. One other reason to be unhappy tonight. But Martin Devine comes in to say Brendan should walk. Well, I mean, he's expressed frustration, Martin, but I do think he has to take some responsibility tonight. You have to work within your means. And I think a top-level manager, for me, and I've always called Brendan an elite manager, but I think he could have done more to galvanise the team tonight. So I think he has to take some responsibility. And I'm one of Brendan's biggest fans. So
yeah, I think so too. Sorry, Chris, to interrupt again. I think so too. And he's even said that the team is good enough to go through. Well, he's come out with a comment similar to that.
Yeah.
So it is on him as well. You know, he's got to take a fair share of the blame for this.
I think so. I think he will. I've not heard his comments tonight. He's been doing this, so it'll be interesting to hear what he says. Polly67 comes in to say Dermot Desmond came out of hiding. Well, again, this is not necessarily just directed at Desmond, but where's the communication? Where's the transparency? What was the strategy behind this? You know, why did we go out of Europe tonight? Is the board going to label it completely at the manager? You know, what we don't get the transparency. So yeah, it would be nice to see somebody come out from their cushy desk and actually address the situation. Edward McClenaghan comes in. I think hopefully I pronounced your name right there, Edward. Boycott the Europa League package. Only thing the board cares about is getting the money. There has to be some sort of action, but it isn't our place to tell supporters how to support their club. But yeah, I think we do need to see some sort of proactive action. Gary Buckets come in, love name. Sack the board, finish what Celts for Change started well. It shows that it could be done. I'm going to bring this one up just because I simply need a little ego boost tonight, Kev. So Celtic Star comes in and says Chris is brilliant, very articulate, and talks a lot of sense.
Is that your burner account?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's my wife just trying to get me to shut up. No, I do appreciate that comment. And look, it's not always easy to come on here and talk after any game, actually, because you've got the adrenaline and the emotion. And look, myself and Kev, we are just fans like everyone else, and it's a tough one for us to do. But listen, we're over 10,000, Kev, on a stream now. I can't remember the last time we were over 10,000 for a live stream. Certainly not when I was hosting. So I'm sure there's not all Celtic fans, and we'll leave it at that. But I've had to send a few out tonight as well. But really, really appreciate everybody supporting, everybody sticking with us, supporting the channel through good times, rough times like tonight. And listen, we'll continue to throw out content. Paul John is one of the most committed guys I've ever seen to making sure that the product always goes out, even with all the gremlins we've had on the platform recently. But look, I do want to let everybody get back to their evening. Sorry we couldn't give you a better result tonight. Hopefully you've not got too bored or fed up listening to us talk, and I can guarantee there'll be lots more discussion points coming in the coming days from Paul John and the rest of the team. But listen, I want to give a big thank you to yourself, Kevin. I know it's late where you are, and I appreciate you coming on and giving me some support on here tonight. And everybody else, thank you very much for tuning into Acsom as always. Hope everyone has a nice night, and we will catch you on the bulletin tomorrow. Thanks again for watching A Celtic State of Mind. Take care.
Nice one.